speak in this space around Black-owned media. I hope if you haven't already, connect with him on Facebook, Instagram. He's been using his own media channels to power his voice about, and offer his social commentary on social issues in the country, racial injustice, and the law. And the moment I get a cue from our producer that we have him lined up, I will certainly transition. Our numbers continue to rise. Then I will get him there. It's very interesting to be in this role of sort of producer of a lecture series, not the speaker themselves, because, I'm scripted. I have notes. I don't know if you can tell. And as a speaker, I'm not typically the most scripted. So I find that when I am scripted and then I have to freestyle, it's less natural for me than if I were just told, hey, go speak in front of a camera. So I'm going to free myself from my notes because I've done everything I need to do. I've told you about the lecture series. I've talked about the Center for the Study of HBCUs. I've discussed the VUU Global platform. I've given shout outs to the Dean and to the Dean of VUU Global, to the director of our presidential lecture series. I have not shouted out my mom and dad, who are no doubt probably watching, because my mom and dad are always, they've watched everything I've done my entire life. So shout out to my mom and dad. That's just a special little shameless plug for myself there, and to the team from the Center for the Study of HBCUs. But I do want to share this. We are living in unprecedented times. I mean, we certainly have seen this move since the turn of the year. The whole globe has been battling this historic global public health pandemic. And then we also have witnessed this summer a historic racial reckoning as we move through Black Lives Matter. We're still moving through Black Lives Matter, and Black lives do matter for those in our listening audience. I like to say that the cool thing about historically Black colleges is Black Lives Matter is not an in vogue hashtag for us. Historically Black colleges are places where Black lives have always mattered. The history of Virginia Union University is a very storied history. We started first in a jail, Lumpkin's jail, the first site of the Richmond Theological Institute that then merged with Wayland Theological Seminary. And these two seminaries become what we now refer to as Virginia Union University. And so it's exciting parallel to me to think that the place that was once the site of Black enslavement is now the place of Black liberation and Black enlightenment. But that is the storied history of Black colleges all across this country. And now not only have we moved from Lumpkin's jail and a theological institute and a merged institute to a world-class, 4-year degree granting university, but here we are, VUU Global, bringing presidential lecture series and other high quality educational opportunities across the globe. And we certainly stand with our HBCU brother and sister institutions to bring the HBCU experience to the globe and to connect with learners and to meet their needs. But this is exciting, right? That we don't stay where we are. We continue to grow, live out our mission, our access mission, and we do it in a way that is committed to academic excellence. And so Roland will talk about this. I know that Michael, Eric Dyson, and many others will do the same. But these are unprecedented times. And as we move into what some are calling I'm not going to call it, they call it a dark fall. If you know anything about me as a person, I tend to operate in light. I think myself to be solar powered. So I want to talk about a bright fall and a brighter spring and a brighter tomorrow. But nevertheless, we're moving into flu season. The pandemic wages on. We are still struggling with domestic terrorism and racial justice in this country. And so the presidential lecture series becomes critically important as a space where we can talk with the experts and engage in meaningful dialogue about these important matters. And so certainly please use the platform, the Q&A and others to share your thoughts with us. We invite you. We thank you so much for connecting with us. I see so many other comments that are coming through. Again, shout out to Brooklyn. Hey, glad that you're here. Shout out to Georgia College and State University. Glad that you're here. Looking forward. We've got the president of our faculty senate in the house. We got students who are master's students. By the way, while we're waiting for the technical glitch to work out with the video, you know, we're VUU Global. We're Virginia Union University, but we're also excited. We've launched a number of new graduate programs. And I mean, I get DMs on Instagram and Facebook every day from students saying, hey, I saw this announcement about your new bachelor's in health science or bachelor's in hospitality management. That's 2 new bachelors that will roll out in the spring. But we've got 4 new masters as of now, a master's in public health. And I mean, if you are living in and through this global pandemic and you're thinking, I need more education, I want to retool, reskill, get ready for that workplace around public health and public health disparities, we invite you to study here at Virginia Union, and certainly to, you know, apply to our masters in public health, our masters in hospitality management, a master's in biology, and a master's in political science. And because we're live, I'm not going to talk about the others, but we've got some other exciting developments on the graduate ed front. Just stay tuned. I like to say that we're an institution on the move, and we are bound to achieve best in class. By 2025 is our institutional goal, but I believe we're going to reach best in class in unprecedented hours, even in these unprecedented times. And it's largely because of the tremendous capability of our leadership, our faculty, the strengthened caliber of our students, our alumni networks, the governance and leadership of our board and president, and certainly all of you. Those of you in listening world, our community of friends and supporters and collaborators and partners. Thank you for all that you do to support the mission and vision of Virginia Union University. And I see that one of our faculty members has put in the chat his contact information if you're interested in that master's in biology or public health. And by the way, if you're interested in anything that I've shared and you don't know where to turn, again, shoot an email to the number 4 help, HELP, at VUU.edu, and we will certainly, there's a volunteer or staff person who will clear that email address and forward it to the right department. And I love this, folks, just talking. Thank you. I'm seeing shout outs about the history lesson that I dropped about our great institution. We're going to send the link to last week's lecture. It is coming. And so I'm going to ask for your patience as we continue to prepare for Roland Martin to join us. I do want to mention, yes, there's a question about the center's website. Yes, we do have the Center for the Study of HBCUs does have a website. Really the best way, I mean, I can give you out the links to all of these, but the best way to connect with the university is through our main platform, www.vuu.edu. If you go to there, the main page, there's a tab for VUU Global in the upper right-hand corner. You can also look under Academic Affairs. There's a link for research centers and institutes, and that will certainly bring you directly to the Center for the Study of HBCUs. And I'm excited. We'll be rolling out more information later, but we've got a new blog series. We've already had special guest bloggers. So it's just an exciting time. And before we move on, keep the comments going, keep connecting. We've also are grateful to, they're not really sponsors, but there have been a number of sources that have helped us share our information about the VUU Global platform and about the presidential lecture series. So I know some of them will listen to this or repurpose some of the content for their various media outlets. So do want to give a special thanks to WELP AM and FM Wilkins Radio in Greenville, South Carolina. We did a great interview with them. To the folks in South Carolina, special shout out. Also, special shout out to Minister Horace Tittle, Minister HT WKHZ on channels AM in Baltimore. Had a great discussion with him about our platform and our new initiative. Certainly Dr. Dahlia, her show is syndicated, but she's on a couple hundred stations, so I can't name them all, but WTNW out of Atlanta. Thank you, Dr. Dahlia, for all that you're doing to help us spread our message to our colleagues and friends and supporters in the Atlanta area. So be on the lookout for these interviews. Connect with us on radio, on TV. We did put in the chat the VUU TV channel, which is on YouTube. So please, excited for being able to connect with you there. And want to now do one quick station identification, and I'll be right back with you to introduce our distinguished lecturer who will come for part 2 of his distinguished lecture. Again, this will be the second and final for Roland Martin, and then we will welcome Professor Michael Eric Dyson on November 4th at 12 noon. Stay with us, stay tuned, grab a refresh of your coffee, do a stretch if you've been sitting in Zooms and team meetings all day, and we'll be right with you momentarily.
Audio.
All right, thank you for your patience. And certainly we appreciate everyone tuning in and staying tuned and connecting with us for part 2, second installment of Roland Martin's Distinguished Lecture Series. And I'm going to just curate this from here. So this is more Roland's lane than my own as a provost, but you know, I'm a member of the Church of God in Christ. So in the Church of God in Christ growing up, they taught me to be ye also ready. You never know when you're going to have to do whatever. So let me do this. It looks like we have the audio for Mr. Martin working. So to the IT team, can we post an image for the presidential lecture series, or an image of Mr. Martin if we can't get the video on? But I see the video now, so maybe we can do this that way. So I'm going to give him his introduction and then let him come in his own form. If we'll get him in queue to the IT team. Many are here not to hear me freestyle and figure out how to share more information with you about Virginia Union University, although I greatly appreciate your patience with that. But you've come to hear from Roland Martin, arguably one of our nation's most well-known and highly regarded reporters and news anchors and commentators. Let me say this, Roland Martin is host and managing editor of Roland Martin Unfiltered. He has been on a number of shows and senior analyst on a number of talk shows. He's the author of multiple books, including Listening to the Spirit Within, 50 Perspectives of Faith, Speak Brother, A Black Man's Road to the White House, and several other texts. He's contributed to many other books and volumes. We all know him. He's been named 4 times by Ebony Magazine as one of the 150 most influential African Americans in the US. He's been named and identified by Jet Magazine. The list goes on and on. News One named him as the #1 Black pundit in the country and on their annual list of influential African Americans. If I went through his whole bio, we would be here all day. But let me just say this. If you were here last week, you know that he is rich on information. He's rich on experience, and he's certainly rich on his ability to connect to us in a way that is distinctly and uniquely his own. It's my great pleasure to present to some, introduce to others, our Presidential Distinguished Lecturer for Part 2, the second lecture, Roland Martin. For all the Alpha brothers in the audience, this is our fraternity brother Roland Martin. 06, here it is. Let's get him in queue because we can't send him live without putting him in queue to the IT team. That was your cue to put him in queue. Let's put him in there, please. And he will come in his own way.
Unmute yourself, Mr. Martin, on your computer.
How was that now? Can you hear me?
Perfect.
All right, folks. Sorry about that. We had major technical difficulties. Also, I literally just flew into Detroit. We were in Columbus, South Carolina on Monday. We were in Atlanta on last night, and now in in Detroit, covering this whole election. And so that's what's going on. And so I want to get right to it. I apologize. We were supposed to be an hour. Obviously, I'm going to have to shorten this, but it's all good. I don't want to hold you guys long. I want to talk about, with the second lecture series, what I'm calling the Third Reconstruction. Since George Floyd's death, we have seen massive change in this country. We have seen literally so many different things. What happened with George Floyd's death and how all of a sudden the country has been responding. What's been amazing with this whole deal, is that you're seeing corporations, you're seeing governments, you're seeing all of these folks make the kind of change they say they want. The question is it real, or is it simply you're responding in the moment? Why am I calling this a Third Reconstruction? Because if you study American history, the reality is that we've had 2 significant periods where issues were addressed specifically regarding African Americans. At the 243 years of slavery, you had the First Reconstruction, which took place arguably 1865 to 1877. It was a period where the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were passed, those Reconstruction Amendments. And those particular amendments then allowed Black folks to be able to gain a measure of freedom. You then begin to see freed slaves transitioning to owning, buying property, things along those lines. What you then begin to also see, you begin to see the white backlash. The reality is, even though the first Reconstruction lasted 10, 12 years, If you read W.B. Du Bois' book, Black Reconstruction, he actually has it going much longer, around 20 years. It was only about the first 5 or 6 years where it was serious, where you had folks then begin to say, okay, we've done enough for these free slaves. It's time to move on. Now, I want you to do the math. You had 243 years of slavery in the United States. Then all of a sudden, after 5 or 6 years, all right, we're good. What's next? We're sort of tired of this. By the time you get to 1876 as a presidential election, folks have gotten tired of, frankly, freed slaves. And so you then had the South demanding that they remove the federal troops from the last 3 remaining Southern capitals. And with the election of 1876, it was a contested election. So the Republicans said, look, if you let Hayes becomes president, Democrats say, we'll let Hayes becomes president if y'all will remove these last federal troops from the last 3 Southern states. Republicans agreed. Black Republicans said the Republican Party turned their back on them. The moment they did that, that's why you hear a thing called the Great Compromise of 1877. That is what led to Jim Crow. That's what led to a Supreme Court making various decisions. First of all, Plessy versus Ferguson, invalidating the Civil Rights Act, where literally the Supreme Court ruled that Congress had no authority to end segregation. Seriously. You then begin to see the Jim Crow laws come in place. So it was the Great Compromise of 1877 that ended the first Reconstruction. It led to 92 years of Jim Crow. Then we go to the 1950s, Brown versus Board of Education. First of all, you got to remember, there was no Civil Rights Act that was passed from 1875 until 1957. So all of a sudden, you have the Brown versus Board of Education decision, 1954. Then you have Emmett Till's lynching in August 28, 1955. Then you have Montgomery bus boycott beginning on December 1st, 1955, which ushered in the Second Reconstruction. That then led to, of course, very similar to the First Reconstruction, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments. The Second Reconstruction, which we don't really call it that, but it's really what it was. If you read Manning Marable's book on the Second Reconstruction, he has a longer period, but it's really 1954 or 55 to 1968. I will push it to 1970. So you have the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, the Fair Housing Act of 68. King gets assassinated in 1968, which led to the Fair Housing Act. It had been blocked. It had been filibustered for 2 years. And so really, I'll push it to 1970. So that's a period of 15 years, 1955 to 1970. So the first Reconstruction lasted 65 to 77, 12 years. The second Reconstruction lasted 1955 to 1970, 15 years. So we are in what I call the Third Reconstruction. But the Third Reconstruction has to be completely focused about economics. You might ask why? Because that was the greatest failure of the first 2 Reconstructions. In the first Reconstruction, Abraham Lincoln, he pushed forward the Freedmen's Bureau, which was designed to help freed slaves. The Freedmen's Bank was opened. You look at Henry Skipgate's documentary on the Reconstruction period. In modern day dollars, $1.3 billion in money from freed slaves was squandered and stolen. There was no bank bailout. Those folks simply were left high and dry. So if you think about Black wealth today, and if you think about the Reconstruction period, the failure of the Freedmen's Bank, Frederick Douglass put in the equivalent of $20 million to prop the bank up and it still failed. If you look at that point, again, modern day, $1.3 billion in money from freed slaves stolen. All white men controlled the Freedmen's Bank. You then go through the period of Jim Crow, Klan, basically slavery without shackles, land stolen from African Americans. And there's this constant having to restart and rebuild, restart and rebuild, restart and rebuild. And so as a result, what you're dealing with here is you're dealing with a economic calamity. The first Reconstruction was about laws, voting laws, It's about doing business with African Americans. Civil Rights Act took place in 1860s. But what we have to understand here is, what we have to understand is that this piece here, this period here is the third one, because it has to be about money. Because money is the piece that we always need to deal with, that Americans never want to deal with. Dr. King talked about this in his book, Chaos of Community, Where Do We Go From Here? It is because America wants us to be free, but America does not want to deal with the economic piece. So as we are analyzing all of these companies, okay, as we're analyzing these companies and the giving that this money they're giving, we have to be asking ourselves, is that really enough? For instance, Adidas, when Adidas announced that they were going to give $10 million, their company had an uproar in their company. The next day they'd announced it was $100 million. I've seen some reports that companies have announced initiatives totaling $20 or $30 billion. But you still have to ask yourself, is that enough? I think what we should be in right now is really locked and load on the financial piece, and that is, how do we make amends, and how then do companies, how then do universities, how then do all these entities, again, address the economic condition of African Americans if we're going to move forward? There are those who say it's reparations. We know that is a hot button word for people on the right and also on the left. But for companies, it's totally different. And so I think what we have to understand here, we have to understand what is going on in this country is an economic reckoning. And this economic reckoning this period can't be like previous to, where we're so fixated on changing laws if we're not dealing with the economics. Because what happens if you shift resources from the police and you defund the police? What happens if you do that? What happens if you begin to impact mass incarceration? Are you still dealing with the economic conditions of African Americans? Are you still dealing with us being frozen out of corporate America? Are you still dealing with us being locked out of industry? Are you still dealing with us still having to deal with the first in many of these areas? Are you still dealing with us not having today in 2020 fewer Black CEOs than we had 20 years ago? You have to ask yourself, is that really what we're talking about? Is it really about another civil rights law? Is it about another voting law? Or is it about truly opening up the economic levers for African Americans? That is where we should be thinking. And our mindset must be calling it the Third Reconstruction, because we have to see this in a very large, massive way, and not as this very narrow or tailored way. That, to me, in the wake of George Floyd, is where our thinking has to be. I think we're thinking too small. I think our asks are too small. We are so used to having to go to folks and making demands, and we're 100,000, 50,000. No, if you're asking for 100,000, you should be asking for $1 million. If you're asking for $1 million, you should be asking for 10 million. If you're asking for 10 million, you should be asking for 100 million. If you're asking for 100 million, the ask should be 1 billion. We must be thinking about billions in terms of what we're asking for, because that is how we are going to actually shift things in our society. You can ask for reparations from political folks. That's going to require folks voting on things. You saw what happened in California. You saw what happened in Asheville, North Carolina. But the reality, on the whole deal, on the congressional side, you got no Republican support. Okay, you're trying to get folks to support HR 40. Totally get it. But it's a whole different deal when we talk about systemic racism that's happening every single where else. And I believe that our demands have to be completely different. I believe we must be framing this in a third reconstruction, and we must be looking at this as a period of 20 years of Reconstruction. First one was 12, second was 15. This one has to be at least 20 years. Why am I saying 20 years? Well, first and foremost, we're going to be the nation majority of people of color in 2043. So we use George Floyd's death and Memorial Day as the marker. That's 2020. This period of focused, active engagement of economics needs to take place all the way through 2040. Our thinking has to be that way. We cannot be thinking about this only within the framework of the next 1 year or 2 years. No, we have to be thinking about this for the next 20 years, because we must be confronting the economic quicksand that we've been operating under, as opposed to saying, no, we're going to create a concrete or a cement or even a steel floor for us to be able to stand on. And I know it's hard. I know it's hard for folks to understand. I know it's hard for people to have to grasp this concept, but it really is thinking much larger and bigger than we have been. I think that's been one of the problems for many of us. We think way too small. And so I want us really locked and loaded and focused on really framing this in a third reconstruction. Reverend Dr. William J. Barber has a book titled Third Reconstruction. He talks about this from a political and social issue, but he's also talked about this from a poor people's issue as well. That's how we must be thinking about this. And I think we should be pushing organizations, be thinking much larger. And we also have to challenge companies. No, don't just make social investments. You hear the people say, oh, we're going to invest in social justice. See, that's what always happens. No, there must be direct. You look at what's happening with these different companies, the deal John Hope Bryant announced with Shopify, where they're going to stand up 1 million Black businesses. That must be it. That must be how we are approaching this. It has to be looking at this as a third reconstruction. That's where we have to be if we truly want to be able to change the condition of our community, of our neighborhoods, of Black culture. A third reconstruction. I think you had questions. You there? Hello.
Hello.
Yes, you're there.
Yes, we are.
Yes, go right ahead.
With the questions from the Q&A?
Yes.
Okay. So let's.
And the only reason, sorry, folks, with the technical issue, I literally have a hard out because we had another piece of week that we have to do well, it was at 1 o'clock, so we're trying to push it as we speak. So sorry about that.
No worries. So folks are saying, speak the truth. We're going to share some of these in the chat. There is a question about the role for Black CEOs, Black corporate lawyers, partners in firms. Where are they? It's also a part that's what I'm talking about. That is a part of this. And so our demands have to be analyzing companies saying, who are your Black board directors? Where are your Black senior executives, your CEOs? Where are the African Americans in senior leadership positions? Our demands must be breaking through those barriers and say we don't simply just want one. You can't have an executive team of 25 people. You got that one Black who's DNI, who's diversity and inclusion, who may be a head of HR. No. It has to be substantive. And that's what I'm talking about. It has to be prolonged. We should not be in a situation where we are 52 years after King's death and we're still talking about the first in corporations. That simply cannot hold. That's what I mean. You're thinking about this in a third reconstruction. Reconstruction means you're reconstructing the society. That's how we get to be thinking. That's so important. And before you joined, I shared about the role that Black colleges, HBCUs, have played really in educating the vast majority of Black CEOs and Black elected officials and Black leaders. So I think that your comments also have implications for what HBCUs ought to be doing in educating and training that generation of folks who would go on and be hired.
Sure, sure, that has to happen. And again, but we have to be thinking about this in a much more larger way. I think, and see, we have to stop allowing people to come to us and having discussions about, oh, interns and entry-level jobs and apprenticeships. No, we must be thinking about these in terms of, no, they're already senior Black people who are there. They've simply hit the glass ceiling. Why aren't they being promoted? That's how we must be looking at this here. That's how we have to be looking at this here. So folks, here's what we're going to do. Again, we had literally about 40 minutes of technical issues in trying to get on. So here's what I'm going to do. What I will do is, if y'all are cool with this, I will actually do a third lecture. You just simply tell me the date and time we can do that. And then what we can do is we can further unpack this third reconstruction, because I really believe that this is the only way we can move forward. Again, I am sorry that it took so long for us to log on. But Brad, if we can do that, I'm certainly open to do that.
Absolutely. Certainly we'll circle back with you and your team to set that up. I'm sure I speak for everybody in the listening audience. They will all show up for it. Maybe in your last couple seconds, any words by the time we do this, we would have had another national election. Any words for the audience as we get prepared for that?
Very simple. Tell every single person you know they must be actively engaged, because voting goes right in hand with the third reconstruction. It goes right in hand. You cannot change public policy if you have folks who are in office who don't want to change public policy. They go hand in hand.
All right. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. And so IT, if you'll put me back in queue, just want to say special thanks again to Roland Martin for joining us for this second lecture, taking on the topic of Reconstruction. Thank you for all of you who tuned in and shared your thoughts in the Q&A and comments. The live chat is still open. It's not too late for you to share your name, drop your contact information. We've got plenty more to come. As you heard it right there live, we're going to try to get a third lecture with Roland Martin so that you can have more time to connect with him. But November 4th, 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will have Professor Distinguished Lecturer Michael Eric Dyson. I'm looking forward to what Professor Dyson's going to share with us. We appreciate all of you for staying tuned, both here in the live teams and certainly on all of our social media platforms, for staying tuned with us and working with us, and your patience through our technical difficulties. We will tag as a team afterward to make sure that we are able to work through those details for our next lecture. Again, connect with us, VUU Global, hashtag VUU Global on all things social media. Stop by our website, www.vuu.edu, and certainly visit the VUU page, register for that next coming lecture, connect with us on social media. If you're interested in more information about any of the exciting things going on here at Virginia Union University and you need to connect with someone, it's the number 4 HELP at vuu.edu. If you send an email there, then we will certainly route it to the right audience. We thank you for your time and your attention. We look forward to connecting with you in the weeks and months to come. Listen, wear your mask, wash your hands, stay 6 feet apart, take care of those of yourself and those in your community and those in your family as we continue to wade through this historic pandemic. But we know this, we have a saying here at Virginia Union, we're stronger together. We'll get to that promise of a limitless future, but we'll do it together, taking care of ourselves and each other. Until next time, I'm Terrell Strayhorn, Provost, Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs. Thank you for your attention. Take care.